Apple has focused a lot of attention to its Pro model in recent years, in the hopes of enticing phone purchasers to go beyond the entry-level iPhone and spend extra for a premium smartphone. That likely to continue this year. After all, just look at the upgrades Apple offered last autumn with the iPhone 16 Pro. That variant gets a bigger screen, updated cameras, and longer battery life owing to a larger battery and more power-efficient chipset, among other changes. That's a lot of upgrades to do on only one model. So how does Apple follow up on it with the iPhone 17 Pro? Based on the reports that have arisen many months before of the phone's expected introduction, numerous more noteworthy modifications are in the works for this year's model. The front camera might be ready for an update, albeit that change will apparently happen for every iPhone 17 model. The true depth camera in this year's iPhones might employ a 24MP sensor instead of the 12MP one Apple's relied on for years. This might feature a redesigned design, enhanced telephoto and selfie cameras, a more powerful A19 Pro processor, and a revised iOS 19 UX. Here's all we know so far about the iPhone 17 Pro. Over the week, the Trump administration released a list of exclusions for its tariffs placed on items imported into the United States from China. The exclusions encompass product categories, including cell phones and laptops, providing Apple a major respite for the iPhone, Mac, and more. In remarks earlier this week, Trump boasted about how he helped Apple obtain these exclusions. A new investigation from the Washington Post looks into the inner workings of the Trump administration, especially as they pertain to Apple CEO Tim Cook. According to the story, Cook talked to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick last week about the potential impact of the tariffs on iPhone prices. In addition to Lutnick, he reportedly talked with other senior officials in the White House. Perhaps most crucially, Cook refrained from publicly criticizing the president or his policies on national television. Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary during Trump's first term, said it's unsurprising that the current government has been open to Cook's suggestions. Tim has a very good relationship with the president, and rightly so. He has been playing a very careful role in that he obviously has a huge dependency on China, but is also hugely important to the US. In general, he has a lot of respect because he's not a public whiner, he's not a crybaby, but comes with the real voice of reality. It's no surprise to me that his suggestions are being well received. But although Apple has secured a respite from tariffs, that peace of mind could be fleeting. In an interview on Sunday, Lutnick stated that the exemption from the reciprocal tariff isn't a permanent sort of exemption, and a bigger strategy would be disclosed in a month or two. The iPhone 17 series will be launched in early September, much like most prior iPhone models. Shortly after Apple's debut event, the new iPhone models will go available for pre-sale ahead of a release the following week. We've grown to take this iPhone timetable for granted since Apple runs a tight ship, both when it comes to creating and producing new models. We've also seen occasional iPhone delays in the past. The iPhone X, iPhone XR, and iPhone 12 series are examples. The first two occurred due of manufacturing problems, but the iPhone 12 timetable was a victim of the COVID epidemic. Given all that, we wouldn't anticipate any delays for Apple's 4 iPhone 17 variants. Trump's tariffs could increase manufacturing costs and lead to higher price tags, but that should not halt production. However, recent sources suggest that Apple is struggling with a very major component issue that may influence the iPhone 17 manufacturing timetable. A vital component in the iPhone circuit board is in low supply, and Apple is apparently hurrying to guarantee it has adequate supply. Ironically, the AI explosion we've been experiencing for a few years might be the problem. AI processors that are in such high demand right now are claimed to be using this specific component that Apple needs to assure it can produce enough iPhone logic boards to fulfill demand. Most iPhone customers have no clue what low coefficient of thermal expansion fiberglass sheets are or why they're required in current devices like the iPhone or next-gen GPUs that let the AI to think. But industry expert Juken Losreef remarked on X that a shortage of low coefficient of thermal expansion fiberglass sheets has disrupted inventory buildup for the iPhone 17 series. Apple is actively pushing its supply chain to deliver and is doing all necessary to obtain the components. A report from Chinese-language Wall Street Insight gives further facts on the situation. Apparently, Apple's Tim Cook is extremely anxious about supply concerns with low coefficient of thermal expansion fiberglass sheets. These ultra-thin glass sheets lie between the different layers of the logic board, shielding them from heat-related damage. The different components on the logic board, such the next-gen A19 CPU that will power the iPhone 17 series, heat up and cool down during normal operation. Materials tend to extend and shrink when interacting with heat, and each does so differently. Without this ultra-thin, low coefficient of thermal expansion fiberglass covering between the different layers of a logic board, the frequent heat-related size variations would ultimately harm inside components, leaving the phone worthless. The same material is used to create GPUs for AI infrastructure. These chips encounter the same thermal difficulties, hence their layers require the same form of protection. Therefore, AI GPU producers will likewise use the same components that Apple and other smartphone sellers demand. Now, Apple consistently builds and sells well over 200 million iPhone handsets every year. When a new series like the iPhone 17 family is announced, you'll typically hear rumors suggesting that Apple will produce up to 100 million handsets for the September to December timeframe. The newest iPhone models often sell out, and that occurs even in years when manufacturing isn't hindered by any type of difficulties. Apple normally catches up with demand, but it means not all purchasers who desire a new iPhone in late September will receive one. Finally, Apple opens iPhone pre-orders on roughly the same day in dozens of regions across the globe. That's a tremendously logistical effort. The iPhones don't simply have to be made and ready, they have to be dispatched to different nations in time for that late September release date. Apple will soon start manufacturing of iPhone 17 to have enough units on hand to meet some of the early demand by September. If the low coefficient of thermal expansion fiberglass sheets continue to be in limited supply, we can experience protracted shipment delays for some models. Remember that the 2025 iPhone generation will be remarkable. Apple will debut an ultra-thin iPhone 17 Air this year, and the iPhone 17 Pro Max could include a few more capabilities. The latter will undoubtedly be a bestseller, but the iPhone 17 Air might also make an impact on shoppers. It's the iPhone I'm seeking to purchase. Increased demand for particular iPhone 17 models, coupled with a tight supply chain, can lead to unforeseen shipment delays for certain variants. That's so I don't anticipate Apple to really postpone the arrival of any of the 4 iPhone 17 versions. If anything, Apple may profit from certain models being sold out even quicker than projected owing to production difficulties, and then catching up with demand by Christmas. Of course, all of this is supposition based on an unsubstantiated story. Apple never admits production and supply difficulties that may harm its products, whether the iPhone or other gadgets. For the iPhone 17 Pro, we anticipate an A19 Pro system on chip to power the phone. If Apple pursues the same strategy it did with the A18 Silicon, it would imply an extra graphic core for the Pro version of the A19 processors. Initial speculation stated that the A19 Silicon will be produced using a 2-nanometer process, which would entail more tightly packed transistors, leading in improved performance and power efficiency. Lately, meanwhile, reports have indicated that Apple's chip-building partner would adopt a new iteration of its 3-nanometer technology. That should still give some gains to performance, but they may not be as significant as what a 2-nanometer chipset would bring. Apple includes 8 gigs of RAM on its latest iPhones. Analyst Jeff Pu has suggested the idea of the iPhone 17 Pro models getting extra RAM to reach 12 gigs. Such a step would assist with Apple's desire to include more on-device artificial intelligence. The bigger iPhone 16 Pro design allows Apple to put a larger 3,582 milliamps battery in that phone. It's unclear whether Apple will have any space to expand battery capacity again with the iPhone 17 Pro or merely depend on superior power efficiency to lengthen the battery life of its upcoming phone. One thing that may change on the power front would be a rise to the iPhone 17 Pro's charging rates from the 20-watt limit that Apple's phones have been locked at for years. A study paper from February indicates charging rates on the iPhone 17 range might climb to 35 watt. That's still a long cry from what phones like the Galaxy S25 Ultra provide with their 45 watt wired charging rates, but it's still a considerable increase. This year's iPhone software upgrade, iOS 19, likely to come around the same time as the iPhone 17 debut. However, we'll have a clearer notion of what to anticipate from such software far before the autumn. Apple routinely showcases its next software upgrades at its annual Worldwide Developers Conference, with a public beta of the iOS version debuting soon after that event. Apple has already planned Worldwide Developers Conference 2025 for the week of June 9, which is when we anticipate to receive our first official glance at the iOS 19 software that will come pre-installed on all iPhone 17 models, the Pro version included. According to iOS 19 speculations, Apple's emphasis this year will be on an interface revamp, the first in a dozen years. The apparent objective is to make software seem more identical across various Apple devices, with the iPhone, iPad, and Mac all scheduled to get similar-looking upgrades this year. You'd also anticipate Apple Intelligence to be a focus of this year's software upgrades, as Apple attempts to follow up on the debut of its AI features. A majority of the updates will be Siri upgrades that were postponed from iOS 18. However, we've heard allegations that built-in applications in iOS 19 will be modified to better take use of Apple Intelligence. So, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more tech news. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.